What's up, guys? Welcome to Ray Makes Things, and we're going to be going over 5 painting tips today. So let's get into it. Tip number 1, don't overload your paintbrush. So what I mean by that is don't put too much paint in your brush before you go to brush, because what can happen is when you go to paint on the figure, if you have too much paint, especially if you've thinned it on your brush, it'll start to run down your model, and you don't want that. And then also it can damage your brushes quicker, causing them to get damaged and having to replace those brushes way sooner than later. And it's better just to load up the tip of the brush and then keep adding more from there. So what I mean by overloading your paintbrush is, so if you get too much water, yes, I know this is yellow water, but also, I forgot to add, if you overload your paintbrush too much, what happens is you can create a bead of water up here, like right where my fingertips at. And what happens is when you go to brush, I've had this happen before. When you go to brush, that water will go down or just touch like the surface of the model on the edge and start to run through your paint that you just painted. So let's see if I can get it to mimic it. So see that bead of paint right, or water right here? Focus. So see how that, and when you're painting and that just does that, it's gonna ruin your day. And this is just a test piece that I'm showing you on. Also with over thinning your paints, you don't want to over thin them, because what can happen, it's not a big deal like when you're just doing it on here, but the moment, here, let's grab some paint real quick. I'll just grab this cheaper metallic paint. Actually, I have a yellow over here that I don't care about. So, not a little too much, but for example, if you over thin it, you're gonna get the same thing as I showed earlier, where your paint is mostly pigmented water. And so when you go to brush onto something, it'll run. It's easy to tell with yellow because yellow is more clear. But like darker colors. And what happens if you do that too much when you go to add coats? It'll start running. And you don't want that. And for some reason, it's deciding not to do it. Yep, see there, right there. So it starts to run, especially like if you're doing eyes with like a off-white and you water that down too much, it's going to pull up and run everywhere, and you don't want that. Tip number 2, you're going to want to thin your paints. Make sure you thin your paints, whether that's airbrushing or just hand painting. Because when you thin your paints, you're less likely to get brush strokes when you brush on the model, like when you go to paint. And doing that is going to make the model look way better. And then also, even if you do have a little bit of brush strokes, you're going to want to hit that with a matte coat. I use matte finish by Krylon. This stuff works great, and as soon as you put that on, it gets rid of a lot of those brush strokes and any imperfections you may see. And it also, if you have multiple colors like skin tones, it'll make those undercoats pop. And step number 3, don't thin your paints or mix paints with your good brushes. I know that might be like an obvious thing, but if you're in the midst of painting and you go to put paint down, you grab the brush right there. You want to make sure that you grab a brush you don't use too often, because what can happen, it'll start to look like that and it'll split. It won't hold the tip as much. So just use a brush that you don't use too often, or not. Use a brush that's kind of on its last set of legs. And tip number 4, don't let your paint dry in your brush. And what I mean is not even just when you're painting. So, or not even just like, but leaving the paint on your brush and going and doing something else. I mean, like when you're painting too, if you put too much paint on, the paint higher up will dry because it's not being used. And if your brush is not wet enough, it'll dry out the hairs in the brush, and it can ruin your brush quicker. And especially if you pay for some of these brushes, like $20 for one brush or $15 for one brush, that's a lot. They add up. And last but not least, step number 5, make sure you use gloves when you're painting. You may see in some of my videos I don't use gloves. That's because sometimes I don't like using them. Or 2, a lot of times I hit my paints, each layer I do, or before I do any like hand painting on them. So for example, if I do a skin tone, like the skin tones, before I do any brushing, if it's like all one piece, like say it's like there's legs and then a clothing piece, but they're not separated, and I have to hand paint after, I will hit it with a matte finish coat before and let that dry. So when you go to touch it, that clear coat is protecting it from the paint brushing off, because the oils in your skin can actually mess up the paint. And also, it's better to use gloves too, because I've had where I've been painting, I get something like dirt or like another paint mark or somewhere, or I accidentally bump my hand with paint and I don't see it right away. Granted, this can still happen with gloves on, but you're going to see it easier with the glove than on your hand. And what that can do is that can rub back off on the figure. And then also, it's easier to fix mess ups, or if you mess up and mark something wrong on the model, it's easier to fix that if there's a clear coat protecting that in between. Because if you need to get like a Q-tip or something and brush that off, if you do that too much, you're going to get rid of that undercoat of paint. And if you have a clear coat between that paint and the paint you're trying to get off, you're more likely to get rid of the clear coat than you are the actual skin tone. For example, if you get like a mark on the skin tone. And then if you want to pick up some gloves. These are like $15 for a 2-pack of these. There are 150 in these at Sam's Club. So a lot of times too, if you look at stores that sell boxes of these, it's just like 50 or 100 for like $20, 15 to $20. And for $15 at Sam's Club, you get 250 gloves. So with 300 gloves total. And I think that's probably the best bet for gloves that you can do. And for the tip where I said you don't want to handle the model with your hand, this is exactly a reason why. So you have oils in your skin, and what happens is, like, say you still have something wet, or like say you get yellow on your hand and you touch somewhere else. See right there? That is because I touched that with my hand. And granted, that can happen with a glove too, but you don't have to worry about the oils on top of that as well. And then also it's easier because sometimes your skin tone blends in with like certain colors. So for example, that doesn't look like there's anything on my hand, but there's leftover yellow paint. Even if I wipe it off, certain colors are gonna pick that up like crazy. See, you can barely see it, but it is there. It's like dusted. But if this was like a white or a maybe a blue, you'd be able to see those yellows rub off from your thumb. Whereas if you have a glove on, you'll be able to see the actual color on your glove, and then you can just swap gloves. Another thing you can get is those there's like finger gloves that just go over your fingers. All right, thank you guys so much. If you guys found any of these tips helpful, please leave a like and comment below if you found them helpful. If not, let me know that too. And let me know if you like this kind of video. I'll put some more down in the future. Maybe I'll do like 5 airbrushing tips, like with airbrushing, like specific resin painting or resin printing and 3D printing. I'll do some like makes with 3D prints as well, like actual filaments. Yep. And if you guys find that helpful, just let me know. And I'll see you next time.